Hey y'all, who dat and what is up? I am Jeff Nowak, and this is our first off-season edition of Inside Black and Gold. I say the first because I do not consider it to be the off-season until we have heard from Saints GM Mickey Loomis and head coach Kellen Moore for their end of the season, state of the union, state of the Saints, state of the franchise, whatever you want to call it, address to the media. It's always very long. It is always dense. It always takes a long time to go through, and it's always difficult to parse out, okay, what is worth taking at face value? What is worth digging more into? To me, it's about a lot of getting stuff on record so that down the line, we can look at it and say, well, back then you said this. So why are you saying this now? That is a big part of the value here. And it also, for better or worse, gives us a good picture of what the Saints are looking at in their offseason and how they're going to approach things. Mickey Loomis, one of the reasons I think he does not like speaking to the media all that much is because he has a very hard time not speaking his mind, right? Even in the answers to the questions that he doesn't really want to answer, he'll typically reveal something, or at least the tip of the iceberg that helps lead you to the rest of the scenario for the Saints, for what they're dealing with. So that's going to be this episode. This is a cold open. We're just telling you what we're doing. First segment is going to be all about Tyler Shough, what Mickey Loomis, what Kellen Moore had to say about Tyler Shough, that situation. Second segment is going to be largely the answers to questions such as, how do you feel about the interior offensive line? Key veterans, Alvin Kamara, Taysom Hill, any staff changes, Phil Galliano, special teams, that sort of stuff. We'll dive into that. Final segment is going to be more future oriented, how we are rolling things forward, how they are approaching certain topics, certain ideas, the draft, all that stuff. We're going to get through it. But first things first, do you want to give a shout out? Chase Young, Tyler Shough. The Saints finished this season 4-1. They did not lose in the month of December, and the NFL took notice. We know that because Tyler Shough today was named the NFC Offensive Rookie of the Month, not Player of the Month, but Rookie of the Month. And Chase Young was named the NFC Defensive Player of the Month. Now, because there are games in January, the Player of the Month is actually December and January, and they deserved it. I mean, you look at what Tyler Shough did over the final 5 weeks of the season. You look what Chase Young did over the final 5 weeks of the season. You know, even the last 2 weeks alone, you're talking 2.5 sacks, a fumble recovery for a touchdown, I think 6 TFLs. Those guys impacted this team in a lot of excellent ways. And, it's good to see the league kind of take notice of that. But that's it. Not a ton of news to report this week. The Saints did sign CFL standout wide receiver Damian Alford, another 6'5" guy. So they're getting ready. They're getting stocked up for next year. They signed a handful of players to futures contracts, but these will all be things we talk about down the line. There will be plenty of time to talk about it. So without further ado, let's get into the episode. I'm going to have about 15 or 16 clips, quotes to play for you. I feel like that's the best way to kind of digest everything, is to hear from Mickey and Kellen, talk about it, rinse, repeat. Let's do it. Who dat? Go Saints. Stick around. And we are back on Inside Black and Gold. Jeff Nowak here, coming at you on a Thursday, not a preview Thursday, but a recap Thursday. And what we are recapping is the roughly 50-minute press conference that Kellen Moore and Mickey Loomis held this week to kind of give a state of the Saints, state of the franchise, state of whatever, going into the 2025 offseason, and an offseason that I don't know about you, feels much brighter. The sun is shining. We can see the light at the end of the tunnel, and we are confident that it's not a train. That's how I feel right now. The Dennis Allen era, it felt like you were in a tunnel and the other end of it was sealed off. That's how that felt. Now you kind of have some hope, some optimism, and we'll see how long that lasts. Hopefully it does. What this season means is the expectations are raised for next year in a lot of significant ways, but primarily for the quarterback position. Anytime you have a rookie quarterback going in, you kind of you have the bumpers on the lanes, right? You know, if he plays poorly, you can say, he's a rookie. If he plays well, you get really excited, but then you kind of wait for the other shoe to drop. Well, never really did this year. Like, we never really saw the league is catching up with you moment for Tyler Shough. Even the loss to Atlanta to close out the season, other than that interception, which was a nice play by D. Alford, and it is what it is. I mean, I watched Matt Stafford throw that exact same interception a few weeks back. Like, quarterbacks throw interceptions. It's the way you respond to them. Good teams don't get on losing streaks. Good teams can lose games. Good teams do not have a string of 3, 4, 5 losses in a row. That's what bad teams do. If you are a good team, you do not find those month-long stretches where you didn't win a game. You find the month-long stretches of the exact opposite. And that's what the Saints did this year, and that's why you feel really optimistic. But the question still had to be asked, how do you feel about Tyler Shough? Is he the guy moving forward? It's an obvious answer, but this is what Kellen Moore had to say.
Going forward with that?
Yeah, we feel great with Tyler. Tyler's done an awesome job through this entire process. He's gotten a ton better. He's taken advantage of a bunch of opportunities. We're excited to have a full offseason to build. I thought what Spencer did in the season also is worth commending. What he put out there on film, I think, is really good film. He's a really good quarterback. He's a starting caliber quarterback as well. And so I feel like that quarterback room has, the depth and obviously the talent to be really successful.
So there you have it. And I think that's one thing you're going to hear pretty consistently about the quarterback room is they feel like both guys played well. And it's a fair point to make. And while Mickey and company are not going to spend a ton of time talking about the potential for a trade of Spencer Rattler, I think we're going to get to some episodes this offseason where we talk about, okay, what could happen? Who could get traded? Who could get moved? And to me, Spencer Rattler is at the top of that list. Now, it might not be a trade until training camp when you get to a point where maybe a team's quarterback goes down and someone just needs either a bridge or whatever to get through a certain chunk of their season. And you look over and say, well, that guy started 14 games. Obviously, it didn't go particularly well, but I always look at a guy like Jacoby Brissett as a guy whose starting career has gone well nowhere, but continues to get opportunities by virtue of having done it. Marcus Mariota, guys who have started a bunch of games will continue to get opportunities in the NFL because there's value in having done it. And most young quarterbacks who are not believed to be the starter on their own team just do not have the experience to get excited to get another team to be willing to give up assets for you. So whatever that is, I don't know. We'll talk about that down the line. But this is Tyler Shough's room. I know there's a lot of, I've had some people come to me and say like, well, this, that, and the other thing, the teams he played did not have top defenses, whatever. Why should we feel like he is the future despite not playing any of these top teams, or at least not beating any of these top teams? And to me, the answer is they show the games on TV, right? And I know that's kind of a dismissive way to go about it, but I don't know how anyone could have watched these games and come away feeling like this is not a starting quarterback and this is not the best option you have. I just don't. And if you're going to tell me that you sat there and watched these games, right? Didn't just watch the highlights of the incompletions, right? If you sat there and you watched the way he worked through these games, how he delivered in critical moments, how he ran the offense, how he found ways to get the job done, right? How he read the defense, how he operated at the line of scrimmage, how he avoided pressure, took too many sacks, but all the issues you see are correctable things. I don't know. Like, I don't think you need me to explain to you a lot of in-depth, nuanced things beyond he's got it, right? And I don't know. Like, there's going to be a lot more to watch. We're going to go into training camp, and he's going to get all the reps. He's going to have an entire offseason to work on stuff, but that's your guy. And I don't think we need to have a debate about it. I really don't. And if you do, it's because you came into this with your conclusion already made and you just tried to backfill information there. Like, go around anyone you trust from an analytical perspective, right? Teron Armstead's got current NFC South offensive linemen texting him and telling him, like, what the heck? I just got away from Josh Allen. Now I have to deal with this guy. Like, it's not a mirage. The question isn't whether he's the future. The question is exactly how bright is that future? And that's what we just won't know for a while. Either way, this is Kellen talking more about Tyler's development, what he expects to see going forward, all that.
What I think Tyler did an excellent job of is, Spencer earned the right to start coming out of training camp. That was first and foremost. I think everyone was aligned on that. Spencer earned the opportunity. I thought Spencer played some really good football early in the season. I think he gave us an opportunity. We didn't win games enough, but he gave us a lot of really good opportunities. And then Tyler just had a really good vision and plan to get better. And whether it's in the classroom, whether it's being the scout team quarterback, his preparation, he was always ready if the opportunity presented itself. And so I think it was certainly a healthy combination of feeling like, we can take another step, we can get better from an offense collectively. But I thought also Tyler, more importantly, felt like he'd taken some steps that he was ready to, have an opportunity to play. And, I thought he did some really good things. There were still some bumpy roads, like we played some games that were still hard early when he started, and he just kept staying steady, kept getting better. And, I thought he grew as those opportunities presented themselves.
Yeah, and that's going to be the question. And I mean, there's really no answer to it. Is, okay, would this season have gone differently? Could it have gone differently had you started Tyler Shough earlier in the process? If you had gone to him, say, in week 5 instead of week 9, would he have been ready? Would you have won more games? Maybe, maybe not, right? Like it's only Kellen, only the coaches know exactly where Tyler was at that point in the season. I don't have any issue with how they handled it. Mickey Loomis doesn't have any issue with how they handled it. I don't think Tyler has any issue with how they handled it, at least not now. I'm sure he wasn't thrilled to have to sit there and wait, but the way he responded to that is the important thing, which is he got in there, he worked, he got better. And then by the time he got in there, what you cannot question is that by the time he got in there, he was ready. He was not overwhelmed. The moment was not too big for him, and he delivered more often than he didn't. And I've said this several times. What I think you saw throughout the course of the season that you should be really excited about is not that he was great all the time. There were several games that it started very slowly. There were several games that he wasn't at his best at the beginning of the game, but he was at his best at the end of the game, right? And that's a characteristic that you go around and talk about great quarterbacks and quarterbacks that have a chance to win big games. And that's something you'll say about them, is they're almost always playing their best football at the end of the game. Sometimes it's not enough, but like I look at a Pat Mahomes and you look at his record in games that they were down 10 points. And it's like something like 16-2, right? Like great quarterbacks figure out the defense. Average quarterbacks get figured out by the defense. And the mistake correction, kind of the mental game where you see something one time, maybe you get beat by something one time and you get back to it again and you know how to beat it, you know what not to do, you know who to go to, you know where to put the ball. And then there's just the mental fortitude to deliver in those clutch moments. And whether you believe clutch is a thing, I know analytics people will say clutch is a myth, but I do not think clutch is a myth. I think certain guys get into those situations and their heartbeat gets slower. It doesn't get faster, right? David Ortiz in the playoffs. You will never convince me in a million years that man is just not clutch relative to some of these other guys. Like if I need someone to go up there with 2 outs and at the game on the line in the bottom of the 9th inning, I knew it was David Ortiz stepping up to the plate. And that's what you would say about the greatest quarterbacks that you can think of is when the game is on the line, you trust them to get it done. You believe they will get it done. And that has more of an impact than just in that moment, right? It has an impact on your defense. It has an impact on everybody. It has an impact on the plays you call because you trust if you put the ball in this guy's hand, he's going to get it done. And whether that's fair, whether we're way out in front of our skis, I don't know, maybe. But all I know is I'm excited about it. And I know a lot of people are too. There's a few other things I want to get to here. This is Mickey Loomis answering a question as, okay, what are the benefits of having a starting quarterback on a rookie contract? Something the Saints haven't dealt with in a long, long time, definitely before the salary cap and the contracts exploded. But that's what the Saints have now. So this is what he had to say.
Yeah, it's just easier to manage your resources. I don't know if it's easy. I don't know if easier is the right word, but you have some leeway to manage resources a little bit, and so, but you still have to make really good decisions. And I think it's pretty well documented that teams that have a quarterback on a rookie deal have been able to do some things and have some success. And so part of that is just building your roster and managing it over, the 2, 3, 4 year period that you're facing. And It's just a different equation. It's a different math equation, really.
It is. And I don't think this has been talked about enough because, you look at, okay, why do you feel like the window can open for the Saints? Are they in a title window next year? No. You got to get to the playoffs at least one time before people will start looking at you and saying you are a title contender. It doesn't mean you can't win. It just means that that's not where your window is going to be right now. That said, you have a 3-year window here that you've kind of dialed in the systems this year. You've developed a lot of young players. You devoted a lot of snaps to rookie players, among the top in the NFL in terms of percentage of snaps taken by rookie players. Next year, you're going to go into it week 1 and kind of figure out, okay, exactly what do we have? And then for the next 2 years after that, you are going to have a rookie quarterback making less than $4 million a season. Perspective. Andy Dalton, the backup for the Panthers, is making $4 million a season. You're also going to have, assuming you don't trade Spencer Rattler and sign a veteran, a backup quarterback making even less than that. So your entire quarterback room over the next 4 years is going to cost you about the equivalent of one 38-year-old Andy Dalton. Look around at the mid-tier quarterbacks in the NFL. Think about how much that costs teams to operate that way. Right? Even if you're trying to be cost secure and sign like a Daniel Jones to a 1-year contract and say you pay him $12, $15 million, whatever it costs to sign a Daniel Jones. If he is the guy, if he delivers, if he's Sam Darnold, if he's Baker Mayfield, that only lasts 1 year. And then you're looking at, okay, we got to pay this guy $36, $37, $38 million a year. Or you're in the position where, we got a Brock Purdy, we got a Tua Tagovailoa, we got to pay him 50-something million dollars a year, right? So if you compare your situation to the Dolphins, right, who looks like they're moving on from Tua Tagovailoa, but they did just fire Mike McDaniel, so who knows? They're paying him $50 million a year. Your starting quarterback is at $4 million a year. That means you have basically a free $46 million to work with that other teams just can't access. And you will have that for the entirety of that rookie contract. Maybe because he was a second-round pick, you won't have that 5th-year option. But that's significant. That's why the Legion of Boom was able to exist around Russell Wilson, right? That's why they were so consistent over that period of time, because they could pay their own players. Like worrying about extending Chris Olave, a way different story when you're paying your quarterback $4 million. Like, yeah, you're going to extend Chris Olave because you're going to have that money to play with, right? I look at Brock Purdy and the 49ers, like they were in way better shape. They had a way easier time building a roster when Brock Purdy was on that rookie contract. Now you're kind of getting into that extension, and that roster is going to be a lot more difficult to put together. So again, like I'm going to talk about this a lot. Like it is a massive thing to not only have that rookie quarterback as your starter, but to have gotten through this season and feel like we don't have any question where we're at. That's a big thing for this team, and that's a big thing for building out this situation down the line. A couple more. Yeah, Mickey talked about a lot of things. We're not going to hear all of them. One thing that was funny to hear was multiple questions, at least 3 different questions that were framed in the, were you surprised by X? Were you surprised by Z? And, it's funny because the more you sit at these press conferences, you start to understand, like, okay, if you ask this question, you are not going to get an answer in the way you expect, because they're going to talk about the question you asked more so than give you the answer to your question. And when you're asking Mickey Loomis, who is trying to be subdued and not just say, you like me now, right? Not just come out there and be like, hey, everyone hated me last year. Suddenly, I think they still hate me, but they can at least admit, like, I made some good calls this year, right? But so, like, he's not doing that. But if you're going to throw the question, are you surprised at what Tyler Shough did? Of course, he's going to say no, right? As he should. Like, no, they drafted him in the 2nd round. They're not surprised that he developed into a starting quarterback. They're happy that he's developed into what he's developed into, but they're not going to say like, wow, we had no idea this would happen. I mean, they drafted him. So why would you even consider that they're surprised by this? Like they're going to dunk on you before they say they're surprised. Anyway, regardless, Mickey's trying to tap the brakes. And I appreciate that, because there's going to be a lot more to prove. But Mickey was asked, okay, you're aware of the optimism in the fan base And how does that feel? Like, what has that been like? This is what he had to say.
How do you process that? What do you feel about that? Do you pay attention to that at all?
Well, look, you can't. I'd probably be in a coma if I didn't recognize that there's optimism, and that's exciting. Look, I want our fans to feel optimistic and have a vision for, the same vision that we have for our team. So yes, I do feel it. I'm excited about that, just like I'm excited about our team. But I think one of the things that I do pretty well is tune out the noise. Tune out the noise when it's negative, and I think it's equally important to tune out the noise when it gets optimistic too. You have to find that balance, and I think that's one of the areas that I do a good job with.
I tend to agree with that, for better or worse. And Mickey, we're going to hear more from Mickey about like the patience the organization tries to maintain. But like, one thing you cannot say about this front office is that they're like super reactionary, that they're constantly doing 180s and trying to throw shit at a wall and see what sticks. Like, they have a plan, they have a process, they stick to it. Like this offseason, they're not going to make any radical moves either. They're going to take 10 days. They're going to give everyone 10 days to get away, and then they're going to come back and they're going to start their offseason process. Like, that's what they do. And so I don't think you're going to see a vastly different approach with the optimism as you would with the negativity. And that's a positive thing, because like, look at the Commanders and look at how their season went. And like, yes, I agree. You need to take advantage of your window when you're there. And they made the NFC Championship in year one under Jaden Daniels, but man, that fell apart fast. And you're seeing people get fired. So you got to be careful. You got to make sure there's tread on your tires at all times, right? And it's really easy to lose perspective when everyone's telling you how great things are going. But it's just as important to be measured then as it is to not overreact when everyone's telling you how much they hate you and you should be fired. And if you can insulate yourself from that, you can insulate yourself from just about anything. But all right, let's hit a quick break, come back, and we're going to dive more into some staffing, players, contract extensions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do that. Again, Jeff Nowak, Inside Black and Gold. Make sure to leave a rating, review on Apple Podcasts. We're going to be changing things up on our schedule for the offseason. Make sure to leave a rating. Let me know what you want to see more of. Again, at Jeff Nowak on X. They got me. I'm saying X now. I'll still say Twitter, but I put the logo in there just because I was tired of looking at the bird. The bird's not coming back. As sad as that is. Either way, who dat? Go Saints. We'll be right back. And we are back on Inside Black and Gold. Jeff Nowak here, coming at you a day removed from Kellen Moore and Taysom Hill. Kellen Moore and Mickey Loomis's joint press conference, which is a little different than we've had in the past. In the past, it has been head coach sitting down answering questions, Mickey Loomis sitting down answering questions. This time we got them sitting kind of side by side, which is a weird thing because you got to kind of direct one to the other. And primarily this was a Mickey Loomis press conference. His answers were the ones that we needed because we talked to Kellen Moore 3 times a week. We already know how he feels about a lot of these different things. It's Mickey's take that we haven't necessarily had. Regardless, we're going to have a little bit of both kind of interspersed. And first things first, staff changes. Will they be happening? How do they feel about them? What I said earlier in the week is, if you feel like there should be staff changes made, don't expect them to happen right away. Even if they do happen, the Saints process is to give everyone 10 days off and then come back and do it. And I know last year people were complaining about that because it kind of put them behind the 8 ball in terms of in terms of maybe the head coaching search. But like I said earlier, like, this team has a process. They stick to it. They're not just going to fire someone in the aftermath of a season because of the emotions that go into it. And whether you think that they should, that's just not what they're going to do. So we'll see. Either way, I do think there's a possibility that a few staff changes get made, but I did think it was interesting how Kellen Moore answered a few questions relative to probably the most likely staffing change if one happens. And so let's hear it. The first question here, okay, do you anticipate making any staff changes? This is what Kellen said.
Well, certainly, we feel great about the staff. It's an awesome staff. Really appreciate these guys coming together. And, you always have to stay ready for different adjustments. We have a really talented staff, and so you got to be ready for the opportunities that may arise for these guys. And so we'll go through that whole process as we go through this. But it's been a really good staff.
Yeah, so that doesn't come off as someone who's eager to push the eject button on his staff. And there were a lot of good things that happened. I always get a kick out of when people go in on the offensive line coach sucks or so and so the running backs coach. For some reason, Joel Thomas has been catching strays. Like, Joel Thomas is a good coach, guys. Joel Thomas isn't going anywhere. I think what's happened is anyone who was associated with the prior regime is viewed as a problem, and whether that's true or not, that's what's happening. Like, it's not a coincidence that the coaches in the crosshairs of a lot of people are Phil Galliano, Joel Thomas, and Brendan Nugent. Keith Williams, you may hear about too. And it's not that there's any real understanding of like they were good or bad. It is, okay, they were holdovers, so they must be bad. Brendan Nugent's the funny one. Like, you have no idea how that's gone. Like is Brendan Nugent a bad coach, or are we talking about an offensive line that had 3 of 5 starters missing for a majority of the season? I don't know. I would be surprised if you have a different offensive line coach. I would be absolutely floored if you have a new running backs coach. Like, Joel Thomas isn't going anywhere. This team was thrilled to be able to get Joel Thomas back, so much so that they made him the assistant head coach. He's not getting fired. I don't think he did a bad job. This guy was making odd, like, how can you complain about the running backs coach when over the final month, 6 weeks of the season, you had Devin Neal and Audric Estime playing well? Like, how does that reflect poorly on the running backs coach? Now, the one that I can get on board with is Phil Galliano, with special teams just being a problem for a large chunk of this season. There were points where it felt like you had it figured out, but I don't know. I think that was just kind of hiding. Either way, this is what Kellen said when asked specifically about special teams.
Yeah, I think we had a lot of moving pieces there, and so I thought credit to Phil of kind of helping navigate that. From a punter battle, that kind of went through all of training camp. We made a change at the kicker position midway through the season. Sheed obviously with the trade, halfway through the year. So we did have a lot of moving pieces there, and so I thought I did a really good job of helping a lot of young players get ready and prepared to contribute on our football team in the special teams that we're a little bit new to that aspect of football, and so. Are there areas that we want to improve on and get better? Absolutely, and that's certainly something we'll do in all 3 phases.
When you talk about special teams, like when I played like Jonas Sanker, who probably went into the season as a special teamer and then becomes a starter, how does that impact that special teams group?
Yeah, I think the injury factor is a big part of this. Our vision of Jonas is he's going to be a 4-core special teamer, and after 1 week, he's our starting safety, and he plays a ton of snaps there. And so, obviously, there was a next man up component of this, and so certainly some younger players that were able to contribute on special teams that maybe started on practice squad or started as kind of an inactive player that quickly became the key contributors there. I thought those guys got better as the season went on. They embraced those roles, and I'm excited for the growth opportunities that those guys have. Yeah, and so, I don't think they've decided whether they're going to make staff changes. I don't think they've decided whether they're not going to make staff changes. But what I will say is what they're saying right there is how they feel about the special teams issues, right? Like, there's going to be exit interviews that happen. There's going to be a deeper evaluation of Phil's performance and whether they think they can get better there. And I think more importantly, this is going to come down to, does Kellen Moore have a special teams coordinator that he feels strongly about and could potentially bring in? But they're not just saying that to say that. I think they do appreciate the challenges that were presented with the special teams coordinator. And, just for perspective, and the reason I asked this question is
you bring in Jonas Sanker. Jonas Sanker is going to be a core special teamer for you. Like, a lot of people are like, why did you cut JT Gray prior to the start of the season? Why? I cannot fathom why you would do that. Well, it's because you drafted Jonas Sanker in the 3rd round, and you think he's going to be an important piece for you, and he's going to get on the field as a special teamer. He's going to be a gunner. He's going to be a jammer. He's going to do all the things that JT Gray is out there doing, and you're not going to keep JT Gray on the roster if he's not going to play. And so there you are. Okay, we'll move on from JT. And then in week 1, suddenly, Julian Blackmon has a season-ending shoulder injury, and Jonas Sanker is your starting safety. He's not playing special teams anymore, right? Jonas Sanker played a ton of special team snaps week 1. I think he only played on kick coverage the rest of the way. He was not on return. He was not on punt coverage. He was not on punt return. And so you kind of had to figure that out. And suddenly it's a moving piece. You're bringing pieces up off the practice squad. You're trying to figure that out. Not going particularly well. You got a kicker who's missing a bunch of kicks. You decide to change kickers mid-season. You have your returner who gets traded mid-season. Like, a lot happened. Does that mean he should keep his job? No, but there is something to appreciate there. And I think it's worth noting that the team feels that way, because if they do keep him, it's going to be because they feel like those headwinds were strong enough that you did not get a good representation of what the special teams group is capable of. So we'll see. Either way, that's what they said about the special teams coordinator. And I do think, barring hirings, right? Like, if someone like, I don't know, Peter Sherman, the linebackers coach, gets hired to be a defensive coordinator somewhere, if one of your assistants, if Jari Evans gets hired to be an offensive line coach somewhere, right? Like, he could leave and you really don't have any control over that. You can block lateral moves. You cannot block promotion. So if those things were to happen, you would have to make changes. But I just don't see a lot of turnover coming. Moving forward, veteran players. I've heard a lot of questions about Alvin Kamara. So let's hear what Mickey Loomis had to say about Alvin Kamara.
Yeah, I think it's unfortunate he got hurt toward the end of the season. But Alvin's always prepared. He's always, he's a talented guy. I don't see a lot of difference there. And I haven't had a conversation with Alvin, since the season ended. So I'm excited to have that with him and see where he's at in his mind space. But Alvin's he's been such an important part of our team for the last 9 years, whatever it's been. And he's a talented player, and we have to give him the right opportunities, and we'll see how that goes going forward.
Yeah, one thing I can say I have in common with Mickey Loomis is I also really don't know where Alvin's mind is at, because he hasn't spoken to anyone since midway through the season. He hasn't spoken since his injury. He was not in the locker room during the open locker room on cleanout day, so no one was able to chat with him then. I did see him pulling out of the facility, so he was there. So we'll see. I do think there is some level of, was he supported well enough in this offense early on? Probably not. They were asking a lot out of him, and maybe too much. I think if Alvin is back next year and he's part of your offense, it's going to be a more significant timeshare than we've been used to. And I think they kind of showed you that this year with Kendre Miller. It was a timeshare there, and I think that would continue, whether it's Kendre Miller, Devin Neal, or whoever else. I think, Doug Nussmeier compared it multiple times this year to the Zeke Tony Pollard kind of split, and I would expect something like that again if he were to play. I don't think he gets traded. I don't think he gets cut. Does he retire? I don't think so, but until we hear from him, we'll have to wait and see. A couple other veteran players. This is what Kellen Moore had to say about Taysom Hill.
Taysom, have you talked to Taysom about whether he wants to play in 2026 or retirement possibility?
We'll talk through all that process. I think for all these players, I think the goal really is, I'm just appreciative of their work. That's the most important thing. And then the offseason is the offseason for a reason. You let the emotions get away from all these seasons and all that sort of stuff, and then take some time. And, we'll have plenty of discussions, with everyone.
And along that theme here is Mickey Loomis on Cam Jordan, Demario Davis, etc.
I think, and it's not just specific to those guys, but there's a process that we go through at the end of the season. It's an evaluation, and then it's a determination of, hey, do they want to come back? do we want them back? And then even that, there's still, okay, there's a lot of variables, you know. What's the contract situation? What's the timeline? There's just too many variables for me to give you a definitive answer on any of that. But look, I'm excited to hear when those guys declare they want to be back here, and I would say on the surface we definitely want to have them back. But there's just so many other variables that exist that I can't really answer that question right now.
Cam Jordan has said he intends to play for another season. He talked to his wife about it. She gave him the okay. Demario Davis has said he intends to play for another season. They made that decision pretty early, and when you have a double-digit sack season for Cam Jordan, you have a career tie tackle season for Demario Davis, that becomes pretty easy. Question is going to be the money. I think he kind of said there, like, yeah, I think they would like him back. It's just going to be a question of whether they can work out the dollars and cents. But, you know, when you look at the salary cap and you look at how that goes, it would make more sense to have him back than to cut him, at least from Demario Davis, Cam Jordan perspective. I don't expect Taysom Hill to be back, and I expect that to be awkward. And I think the team is going to sit here and hope that Taysom decides to retire. Because if that were to happen, then they could send him off the right way. They could do the farewell, the thank you for everything, blah, blah, blah. It would be this really nice moment in Saints history. And, you know, eventually he'll be in the Team Hall of Fame. That's going to happen either way. If he were to continue playing, I think it would get awkward because they would probably not want to re-sign him. And he would end up going somewhere else, finishing his career with, I don't know, the Broncos. And it would just be kind of awkward. And you would have to explain, well, why didn't you want to bring him back? So we'll see. Yeah, that's all I have to say on that. A player who's definitely not going to retire, although he did contemplate it briefly earlier in his career. Chris Olave, he's going into his fifth NFL season. They have already picked up his option year. It's going to be something around $15, $16 million for that 1 year, but I think they would much rather get a contract extension done. I think Chris Olave would rather get a contract extension done, and he's earned it with his play. This is what Mickey had to say when he was asked, okay, how high of a priority at this stage is getting a contract extension done with Chris Olave?
Well, you know, Chris is obviously an important player to us and had a really good season, but, you know, we haven't even really spent much time thinking about that right now. I mean, we've had a couple conversations with his agent, but, you know, that's part of that'll be, you know, part of this offseason. I can't tell you how high it is or low it is. I don't have the whole list yet.
Yeah, to me, this gets done, and I don't think it drags out into the regular season. You know, the Saints are not in the salary cap constraints that a lot of people seem to think they are. And so I think the conversation on this is going to end up being more so about the protections built into the contract for any potential career-ending injuries, more so than the top line number. And we're not going to know a lot of those specifics, but I assure you that that's going to be part of the negotiation. And if it drags out, you know, and I look at like a Zion Williamson's contract where they had all the weigh-in stuff, like kind of those secondary items of this, that, and the other thing that get a little tedious. I think Chris is going to get a big contract. I think he's going to be making somewhere north of $30 million a year. I think the Garrett Wilson contract is where you'd start if you're Chris Olave's agent. And if you're the Saints, you're trying to come in anywhere south of that is a win. And that would be somewhere in the $32 million a year range. Because, you know, you look at the numbers and, you know, even with the blood clot issue to end the year, it's not a concern long term. It's just something that happened, and good thing they caught it. The back issue, we played through it. He's battled through it. He played in 16 games, played through injury a couple times. Like, he's done everything you need him to do. He's going to get paid, and especially with the chemistry he showed with Tyler Shough toward the back end of the season, like, there's just no question it's going to happen. It's just going to be a question of exactly when and what tier does that contract land in. But I think the Saints team understands they're going to have to pay him. One last thing. This is Mickey talking about the interior offensive line, which is obviously something that a lot of people have been looking at. He does mention Cesar Ruiz specifically, so here we go.
Yeah, well, you know, I think that the number one thing there is we've got to stay healthy. You know, Eric McCoy is a really, really good player, but he's been injured the last few years, so we have to, you know, examine that. Hey, Are we putting him in difficult positions? How can we, correct that and not let that happen again? Caesar's a really good player, and yet, I think we've got to get more out of him as well. Obviously, Dylan stepped in after Trevor, the Trevor trade. I thought he did a good job. So we'll evaluate that interior offensive line. But, and I think, by the way, we had a number of guys step in. Luke came in and played for Eric and did a good job. But we're going to have to evaluate that position, and we've got some free agents there. So it's going to be an area that we pay a lot of attention to in this offseason.
Yeah, and for good reason. I mean, Eric McCoy will be back. He will be your starter. Hopefully, you can figure something out. When you have back-to-back season-ending elbow injuries, your elbows, that part of your body, is as an offensive lineman, like, that's important. Maybe you could put a brace on it. I don't know, but they're gonna have to figure something out. He's still a good player. He's still starting center in the NFL, but can you rely on him? I don't know. Do you have to bring in, get him trained up so that when you need him, if and when you need to replace him, you can do that? We'll see. Do you bring back Luke Fortner? We'll see. I do think you need to bring in at least one starting caliber interior lineman, because I don't think Dylan Radins is the future for you at that spot. Do you draft someone in maybe the second, third round? Do you go in on free agency and maybe try to hit the top of the market interior lineman, knowing you have some money you can play with? We'll see. The other guy he mentioned there is Cesar Ruiz, and I know Cesar Ruiz is kind of enemy number one for a lot of people. People don't think he's a starting caliber guard. He is a starting caliber guard. Is he a top end starting caliber guard? No. But the thing that I get a kick out of is like the idea that every time he goes out, they get better. They don't. When Caesar is not in there and you replace him with Bull Sherman, what happens is not the offensive line gets better and the offense gets better. What happens is you have to spend a lot more time figuring out how you are going to survive with a backup right guard, and you're sending more help that way. And when you're not, you are always aware of the pressure potentially coming from that spot, right? And while Caesar, like Mickey said, like, I think you need to see more from him. This team's not going to cut him. He's going to be your starter. He's got to be better. And we'll see how that goes. But that's where you are. And I do think that has to be a focus, is that position in general has to be a focus. I'd like to see at least one starting caliber player added and at least one developmental player added who you think can start down the line. I keep looking at Evan Neal, former first-round pick from the Giants. They did transition him to guard. I don't know if he ever played there, but that process has already started. I think it would be funny if he had Evan Neal blocking for Devin Neal, but that's neither here nor there. All I know is Kellen Moore loves the former first-round tackle reclamation project at guard. He did it with Mekhi Becton. It worked like a dream. He tried it with Trevor Penning. It didn't work like a dream, and you traded him, but I don't think that proclivity is going to go away. Either way, that's it for that segment. Those are the questions we're answering. Those are the players, the positions you're answering, and we'll see how that develops throughout the offseason. Going to hit a quick break, then we're going to come back and talk about some forward-thinking items, the draft, the salary cap. A wide receiver who's just been kind of sitting around on the roster and has some legitimate upside that States could potentially mine. All that and more. Again, we are going through the press conference, Mickey Loomis, Kellen Moore, to wrap up the 2025 Saints season here on Inside Black and Gold. Make sure to subscribe. Otherwise, stick around. And we're back on Inside Black and Gold. Jeff Nowak here. We went through the Tyler Shough. We went through a lot of the players, a lot of the staff that we'll have to wait and see what Kellen Moore, what Mickey Loomis had to say on those subjects. And now let's look ahead a little bit. And one of those things, probably the most interesting answer we got out of this whole process, but a 50-minute interview, Mickey Loomis was asked, how do you balance the long-term build versus, hey, the NFC South champion this season was 8-9. You could win the division without solving a lot of long-term problems. But do you focus on that, or do you focus on how do you build a title contender? This is what Mickey said.
Look, I think all of us, every guy with every team, whether it's a coach or GM, thinks, they have a vision for how they can win their division, regardless of how strong or weak, you may think it is. So we're going to approach it the same way. Hey, how do we improve enough to win the division? And we don't want to just win the division. I mean, we don't want to, be an 8-8 or 8-9 winning team in the division. We want to win the division, be dominant, and have a chance to make a run in the playoffs. So that's what our goal is going to be.
Yeah. So what I say to that is I'll believe it when I see it, because I do think it's a lot more difficult than he's making it sound to stay the course when kind of that immediate gratification is there. Right. And what is staying the course? To me, staying the course is not kind of going back to your baser instincts of packaging 5 picks to move up and get one player, right? The Marcus Davenport trade. That's a win now trade. And like, yeah, you want to win now. You're going into the season trying to figure out the best way to go and win your division. And the division is eminently winnable. There's just no way around it. All you have to do is have a pulse to win the division. Heck, the Saints weren't that far from winning the division this year. They were one Chris Olave catch against the Dolphins away from going into week 18 with a chance to beat the Falcons and win the division. That's how close it actually ended up being. And now I don't think anyone would have guessed that in week 13 when you were down in Miami, but that's the reality of where you are. So, I do think that is an important factor to keep in mind when it comes to spending cap assets, when it comes to managing your draft assets, when it comes to making decisions on free agents, when it comes to, are we going to play young player versus veteran player, and how do you handle that? Regardless, I do think that this team does understand that, and we'll just have to wait and see how truthful what he's saying there is, because I do think, if you're being honest with yourself, you're one season away from the scenario that he's talking about. And I think the goal of next season should be to make sensible additions, to handle, to add young players the same way you added young players this year, and not leverage future assets, and continue to play young players and let young players develop so that in 2027 and beyond, you can really start to go all in. If that starts to happen this year, I look at the Commanders and I look at how things went for them, and that can be tough, man. Like, you went all in on the quarterback and then the quarterback wasn't there, and suddenly it's just not working. You're firing people. Like, I don't think anyone coming out of the NFC Championship last year would have said, that team's going to be firing its offensive coordinator next year. But that's where you are. So you got to be careful. You got to take advantage of the window, but also understand exactly what your window is. And so that answer is nice to hear. I need to see it followed up with actions, and we'll have to wait and see. I thought the draft strategy was adjusted last year in a way that I appreciated. You made all your picks contributed. There's nothing stopping you from doing that again. Now, what is stopping you is all the young players you had this year are going to be blocking young players next year. And that is something that Mickey said that is true. Like, you look at the drafts and it's like, this is a terrible draft, except, okay, the front office can only make the picks, right? Development, reps, playtime, that's on the coaches. And so, like, a player like Zach Bond, do you think the front office and the scouting department look at it and say, we really missed on Zach Bond? They look at it and say, no, we nailed it with Zach Bond. The coaching staff just didn't play him, right? So you do need to have that alignment too. And I think that there's value in having this coaching staff, which is going to be largely static, coming in for a season, already being here this early in the offseason, where they can have input and put their fingerprints on that scouting process in a way they were not able to last year. So we'll have to see. And kind of just rolling that forward, this is Mickey talking about, okay, very patient to a fault. Is that an advantage for this team? Is patience an advantage for this organization?
How much does it help? I don't know that I can answer that. That's just, that's really, I probably am overly patient. Sometimes your greatest strengths become a weakness, and so I'm really patient, I feel like, and Whether it helps or not, hopefully it does. I think it does, but I'll continue to be that way. Again, we're excited about Tyler. You're all excited about Tyler. We're excited about Tyler, but we have to remember that he hasn't had 17 starts yet, and so we're going to go into next season with these high expectations, and there's nothing wrong with that, but we also have to temper that by the fact that he's a rookie, not a rookie, he's a second-year quarterback, and he's had less than a full season of start. So we got to keep that in mind as we go forward, that there's building blocks here, and we cannot skip any steps.
Yeah, I do view the patience as a strength, even when it's annoying. Now, should the front office, should the ownership be a little less patient? Maybe. But if you are able to, if the trajectory that this team is on right now continues into what is another era of winning Saints football, and you kind of went from a long, successful era, had a lull where you reset a lot of things, and then go into another reasonably long, successful era. I don't know what the peak would be. I don't know if it's going to be the peak of Sean Payton and Breeze, but what is acceptable to say you built something? We'll see. But if that's the case, then a lot of these takes that Gail's not doing a very good job and she's not a good steward of this program, Mickey is not doing a good job and he's not a good kind of assessor for this organization, I don't know, when do those takes stop making sense, right? And I have often felt you look around, you look at the Giants and how many coaches and GMs they've had, and you look at the Jets and the Panthers and all these teams that have so many times reset and just don't seem to be getting any better. Would you have benefited from taking the longer view a little bit more? I don't know. Do the Saints benefit from being in a small market and not having as much market pressure on them to make those kind of quick sweeping decisions? Absolutely. But to me, that's not necessarily you're taking advantage of that in a negative way. It is, hey, this is an advantage you have and you should take advantage of it. Because I do think that the patience can be a virtue. Now, if it was up to Mickey, you'd probably still have Dennis Allen as the head coach. So it's not always a good thing, but it can be a good thing if it's used appropriately, right? If the patience is not taken advantage of because you're too stubborn to admit when you made a mistake. That's where you need to strike that balance. And that's where Gail kind of stepping in and being that, all right, we're doing it. That's where you benefit from the checks and balances. And so as long as that's happening, as long as there is a legitimate checks and balances happening to cut through, okay, we're not going to make a rash decision here, I'm okay with it. When it's one person being stubborn because they don't want to admit they were wrong, then it's problematic. Either way, we'll see. Because if the Saints are back in the playoffs next year, it'll be really difficult to tell Gail she was wrong to wait it out with Mickey. It'll be really difficult to tell Mickey was wrong to kind of allow this slow burn to happen. And there you are. A couple other things before we kind of move on here. The salary cap. It's the most misunderstood thing in sports is the NFL salary cap. And the second most misunderstood thing in sports is how the Saints manage the salary cap. This is what Mickey said he's happy with where the Saints are. They're going to go into this year $27 million over the salary cap. And to the uneducated observer, that was wow, what a disaster. To anyone who's been paying attention, that's chump change for this organization, right? A couple of years ago, you were talking $110 million that they had to clear. $27 million, you could do that in a weekend. And this is what Mickey had to say.
Yeah, I think just the volume of things that we need to do is really what changes. Those numbers, when you look at them at the end of the season for any team, there's a lot of nuance behind all of it. Because you just see a number, you don't see how many players are under contract, how many voids exist, how many of these, balloon numbers exist for the next year that you knew all along you weren't going to, that wasn't going to be their contract. So there's a lot of nuance to it, but obviously over the last 2 or 3 years, those things that we have to do to get under the cap have diminished, and this will be it'll be the lightest work that Kai has to do over the last couple of years. So that's a good feeling.
They said you feel pretty good about that heading into the offseason.
Yeah, we're going to definitely feel good about that. And remember that COVID year, and that impact on our cap and every team's cap. That was a blow out of left field for us, and so we've had to overcome that, and it takes a while.
Yeah, and so just for perspective, $27 million. So I'm just going to go through this list in real time and tell you the names that I expect to get restructured. Eric McCoy, $6.9 million, definitely getting restructured. Carl Granderson, $8.6 million. Unless he is traded, definitely getting restructured. And so you're talking about a little over $15 million right there. You're more than halfway done. Chase Young, $10.8 million. So you're already up to $26 million with just those three restructures of players that you expect to be contributors for multiple years beyond this one. Most likely, Justin Reed also gets restructured. So not only have you cleared it, you are $5 million clear in operating potential, which pretty much is your draft class, right? So, so just those moves, you have already cleared enough space. Like that is a weekend of work for Kai Harley, and they could clear it if they wanted to. And this is why when I say they are not that strapped from a cap perspective where they can basically not do whatever they want, they could clear an additional $40 million without sweating. Now, will they? No, they won't do that. That would be an example of going all in too early. But the point is they could. And when you can say that, it means that the cap is not preventing you from doing anything you want to do. The question is not, can you do it? The question is, should you do it? And that's always been the question. And so anyone telling you that, looking at the cap table and saying the Saints can't sign this guy, they can't sign this guy, they can't extend this guy, that's not true. It's only a question of whether that is a good move or a bad move. There's nothing preventing it from happening. Should you be playing in the deep end of the free agency pool? No. Could you be? Yes. And that's where we are. And I'll have another episode kind of breaking down the specifics of how they get under the cap and how they can manage it. But for now, just understand the cap is not an issue. And I'm sure Kai is excited to not have to spend nearly as much time messing around with it. Because remember, a couple years ago, they were in the $100 million range trying to figure this out. And it was much more difficult. And they were in a situation like Emmanuel Sanders, Janoris Jenkins. They wanted to keep those guys. They couldn't because of the cap. That has not been an issue over the last several years, and it won't be an issue going forward. And this is a season where you're going to eat several cap bombs that you can because you have the young quarterbacks. Only two more clips, and the first one is kind of out of left field, but it's because it's a player that I'm sure a lot of people just forgot about because he's just been kind of hanging out. And it's Jalen Polk, who the Saints signed prior to the Saints traded for prior to the season, but has not played due to injury. This is what Kellen Moore had to say about Jalen.
I think really good example of just Mickey and the crew being really proactive and recognizing an opportunity that, from a longevity standpoint, is going to give us, a guy that we all felt really good about. I was in Philly for 2 years ago when he went through the draft process. Everyone felt really good about Jalen. Again, an example of sometimes a change of scenery can be really beneficial for someone. He has been excellent this entire process. For our opportunity to kind of go through the rehab process with him here with our guys has been excellent. His work in the classroom where he can still be, around those guys has been awesome. And so I think it's going to provide him an opportunity to be just so much further ahead when he gets to the spring ball where, he's not going through that transition now. He's already gone through that process. And so obviously we feel like he's going to be able to play a really beneficial role for us.
Yeah, and so, it's funny. I talked to Jalen on Tuesday or Monday, and he said pretty much the same thing, which is like he knows what's expected. He knows what the offense is. He's not going to show up next training camp and have no idea what's going on. He's going to be way ahead of the curve. And in that sense, it's a lot more like a college. You talk about college players, getting early enrollment, showing up, for spring ball so that by the time the season rolls around, like they have a head start. And that's basically what you're getting here. You're basically getting an early enrollment wide receiver in your program that, like, guys, remember, he was a second round pick. That New England team last year was a disaster. The coaching situation was a disaster. You're not going to hold that against him. The skill set is there. I had a few people ask me, like, what is he as an NFL receiver? It's tough to say because, I've watched a decent bit of his tape at Washington. I watched what there is to watch with New England. It's really tough. It can be tough to translate college to the NFL because it's a very different game from a receiver perspective. Like the routes you're running, the concepts you're running are very different. You got to block a lot more at the NFL level. There's no true wide side of the field at the NFL level, so you don't have as much room to run and run away from people. The guy I keep coming back to is Tyler Lockett. Maybe Brandon Ayuk type player, like not a burner per se, but a guy who can get downfield and track the ball well and make big plays. He was a big play machine at Washington. If you go watch his tape, he's just burning people over the top constantly. Played with Michael Penix, who throws a really good deep ball. But he's just a guy that, like, you look at this draft, and we're going to talk about the draft assets here in a second. And you say, okay, the Saints could spend high on a wide receiver. Well, they have Chris Olave. He's going to be back, hopefully on a new contract. They have Devon Bailey. He'll be back and kind of be that big body guy that you didn't have going into last training camp and now can spend an entire training camp working with the quarterback and getting more ingrained in the system. And you saw that connection between Tyler Shough and Devon Bailey build. And then, okay, who's beyond that? Mason Tipton, Jalen Polk. Trey Palmer's there too. I don't know about Trey Palmer. Like, that injury is really bizarre. They had the option to bring him back if he was healthy. They did not. So we'll have to see. I haven't seen him in the locker room. I haven't gotten a chance to talk to him. But he's an option as well. So, if the Saints, I know a lot of people are like, oh, wide receiver day one or day two got to happen for the Saints. I don't think it has to, because you already feel like you have that upside player in Jalen Polk. Now, you could still bring in a player. You could bring in a playmaker. I'm just saying, like, if you're looking for a guy who can come in and potentially impact this team, he's already here. You just kind of added a draft pick through trade. So that's just something to consider. Finally, this is what Mickey said about the draft assets in general. Here you go.
Yeah, I feel good about that. I think we're going to have an opportunity to impact our team, and I'm excited about I'm excited about the draft class that's coming up. The discussions I've had with Jeff and his staff, there's a lot of players that will fit us at a lot of different positions, so I'm excited about that. I think the depth of this draft class right now looks pretty good, and I think we're going to be in a position to kind of take the best player that's available that can impact our team, as opposed to we have to have this position or that position. Obviously, there'll be positions that we prefer, but I don't think we're going to be in a position where, hey, we have to get, this particular position. So I'm excited about that.
Does that up the odds at all, the ever elusive possible trade back, if there is, you have to go in direction?
Yeah, it helps the odds. Yes, it does.
So yeah, the Saints still have yet to trade back into draft in the Mickey Loomis era, and I'd expect that to continue. But we'll see. We'll see. The trade I always go back to is, so the Saints are going to pick number 8. They have a full allotment of picks. Now, if you recall, people were a little up in arms about the Devon Bailey trade because they sent away a 4th-round pick to bring him in, along with a future 7th-round pick. But in the Rashid Shaheed trade, they brought back a 4th-rounder and a 5th-rounder this year from Seattle. And so obviously you lose a few spots on that pick because you traded away the Saints pick and you're getting back Seattle's pick. We don't know exactly where that's going to be because they are in the playoffs and it'll depend on where they go. But they have a bye in the first round, so it'll at least be in the 20s. They're not going to be one of those first-round and out teams. So we'll have to see exactly where that is. Either way, you have your own 1st-round pick, you have your own 2nd-round pick, you have your own 3rd-round pick. Those are the premium picks. Those are the picks I do not want to see the Saints parting with going forward. Anything outside of that, anything day 3 and beyond, you can be aggressive with, to me, in my opinion. But I want to be making those picks in the first 3 rounds. Beyond that, you have the 4th-rounder from Seattle and probably a comp pick. We'll have to see how that goes, but Ike Yadam is not going to prevent you from getting that comp pick based on his play time, which was a nice move by the Saints this year because he was a important piece on special teams and did not cost you that comp pick. And whether they want to admit it or not, that was on their mind. And they played Quincy Riley when they needed to play Quincy Riley. And then they'll have the 2 5th-round picks, one being their own, the other being from Seattle. And then I believe they don't have a 7th-round pick, but they have a 6th-round pick. I always lose track of those late round picks, but they can do whatever they want in the draft. And so, like, I look at the Justin Fields trade, right? I think the Bears traded up from 20 to 10. I can't remember what year that was, but, the Giants picked up an extra first rounder. They moved back. They ended up drafting Kadarius Toney, which didn't work out. But at the time, it felt like a really good value for them. And so we'll see. I don't expect that to happen. I don't expect the Saints to trade back. But I do feel like the Saints are in a really advantageous position, particularly if a lot of these quarterbacks come out. Arvell Reese announced for the draft today. So, you look at all the teams that need quarterbacks, all that does is bump a position player down the board, because the Saints go into this draft knowing they feel good about the quarterback, they feel good about the left tackle, they feel good about the right tackle, they feel good about their star edge rusher in Chase Young, they feel good about their depth on the defensive line in Cam Jordan and Carl Granderson and whatever else. They have a 3rd round pick coming back in Vernon Broughton. They have a 1st round pick in Brian Brzee. Like, the trenches and the quarterback, like your defensive line, your quarterback, and your offensive tackles. Those are the positions that you have to draft in the 1st round to feel confident you're going to get one that can be a long-term starter for you. Yes, there's always situations where it's like, okay, Teron Armstead's a 3rd rounder, whatever, but that's a very rare scenario to find a long-term tackle, a long-term quarterback, a long-term edge rusher outside of the 1st round. At least guys that you're expecting to impact your team right away. And what that means is the Saints don't have to reach for any of those guys. A couple years ago, the Saints could have done 2 things. They could have taken Taliesin Fuaga at number 13, or they could have taken the best defensive player on their board, the top defensive player on their board. They got on the clock, and not a single defensive player had been drafted yet. But they didn't have the luxury of saying, hey, we'll take Leitu Latu, we'll do whatever. They had to take a tackle. They were desperate for a tackle, so they took him, right? I don't know if they reached. He may have just been at the top of their board anyway, but like, you didn't really have an option. You had to take Fuaga. Fuaga has been good. You feel good about it. Last year, you needed a tackle. You were like, all right, Kelvin Banks, let's get it done. Were there other players? I don't know. You took the tackle because you needed a tackle. You took the quarterback at number 40 because you needed a quarterback, right? And now you look at this draft and you say, we can do anything. We can do anything we want. We can even trade back. I don't think it's going to happen, but that is a good spot to be in, and that is how you can make some really, really, really good draft picks. What you can't do is spend a ton of assets to move up. I'd be okay with it if you took day 3 picks and turned those into an extra day 2 pick. What I can't do is take day 2 picks and turn them into a higher day 1 pick. That's what I can't do. We've seen them try. It does not work consistently enough. Stand your ground, hold your water, pick the best player available, add talent to your roster, get better, compete long-term. That's the recipe. Build through the draft. We'll see if they can do it. But all right, that's going to wrap it up. You got Mickey, smiling Mickey over there to my left. It's good to see him smile, right? He didn't even chew gum this year. That's a win for everybody. Anyway, who dat? Go Saints. This is Inside Black and Gold. I'm Jeff Nowak. If you got all the way to the episode and you haven't subscribed yet, what the heck are you doing? If you're watching this on YouTube, hit the bell. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, make sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on auto downloads if you're into that sort of thing, and leave a rating, leave a review. Let us know what you think. Let us know what you'd like to see more of. Any formats, any concepts you'd like us to get into. We'll be gladly doing that. Over the next month or so, we're going to be dialing back to probably 1 episode a week with maybe some secondary episodes based off breaking news. I'll also be hosting Sports Talk on Fridays with Steve Geller from 4 to 7 p.m. So check us out there. I'll be pulling some of that content down and putting it in the feed. But we probably won't be ramping up to the 2 episode a week standard until draft season is back and get some time in. Get all those doctor's appointments in that I've been avoiding, that sort of thing. Try to make sure I'm alive long enough for this podcast to get even more popular. I think that's the important thing, is to making sure my blood pressure is at the right level before I commit to more podcasts. Either way, thanks everyone for listening. It's been a really fun season. Despite the start, it ended up being a fun season, and I would not have guessed that at 1-8. But I will say at 6-11, I'm feeling good about that. I hope you are too. Who dat? Go Saints. Until the next time. Peace.